I was coaching clients. And some of you guys know the story. At my peak, I had 167 clients. My average client stayed with me 2+ years. And everyone always said, Jason, how do you create the retention that you do? Right? How do you create results and how do you create retention? And it literally comes down to these 4 words. This is the $1 million framework. And so I'm going to walk you through it 2 different ways. I'm going to walk you through it in the setup, and then I'm going to walk you through it in the check-in process. How many of you guys struggle sometimes in check-ins? You're like, what do I say? How do I make sure that the client's getting value? Some of you guys feel like, oh my gosh, is the client going to leave me because they don't know what they're getting anymore? Like, how many of you guys struggle with a really good structure to your check-ins, or you feel like your check-ins are actually what's keeping your client in, right? Right, we got a bunch of yeses that are coming through, right? We struggle with it. And that's okay to admit as coaches, by the way. If you guys didn't, I would be wondering why you were here. If you guys thought you knew everything, I'd be wondering why you're here. So that's okay. So here's the reality. When you're doing this, the very first thing you have to have is the deepest dive into awareness. And so what is awareness? Awareness is a lot more than an intake form. Right? We understand the intake form. We also, if you guys have been through our level 1, we do a deep dive into the intake form. You know, it's more than your age, your height, your weight, your physical stature. It's more than your dietary preferences. It's more than your injuries. It's more than progress pictures, right? Real life awareness is not where we are, but more importantly, how did we get to where we are? And so if I hired one of you guys and you didn't do any sort of awareness with me, and you put me in some sort of restrictive diet because I said I want to get ripped, it would probably be a disaster waiting to happen. Why? Because my background is anorexia. And what you have to understand is I've done 2 different major diets in my life. I did the anorexic diet where I did nothing and damn near killed myself. But then I also did a diet through an amazing mentor, through no fault of his own. But it was called the cycle diet. And in this diet, every single week, I was allowed to eat whatever I want on one day. I was encouraged to eat as many calories as possible for 24 hours. And so guys, when I say I went to like Dunkin' Donuts on the way to IHOP, washed it down with a Frappuccino, took a nap, had Chipotle, had some other baked goods, went and got pizza, went to Cheesecake Factory, had 2 entrees, 3 desserts, and then tried to fit one more thing in before bed. Like, I'm not lying. That's what I did every week. And that probably sounds really fun to some of you guys, but here's what you have to understand. It created a really bad relationship with me and food. It created a really bad relationship with the way that I connect to quote unquote cheap foods. And so if you were to ever go have pizza with me, you would quickly realize Jason can't eat 1 slice of pizza, he eats a large pizza. Pizza is not a slice, we measure pizza in pies in my world. We don't measure desserts in bites, we measure desserts in pies. We don't go get like a Frappuccino, we get the biggest Frappuccino we can get, and then we wonder, what else can I have with it? There's nothing that you can ask me to put on an intake form that's going to have you create that level of awareness necessary to never put a cheat meal in my diet. Better yet, for when I come to you and I say, hey, I want a cheat meal, and you don't have solid reasoning as to why you can't give it to me. Because a lot of you would just say, hey, great, we'll account for it in your calories or fit it in your macros, not understanding that to me, fitting pizza in my macros might as well still be restriction. And you're like, well, why is that? It's not discipline, it's awareness. It's understanding who Jason is physically, physiologically, mentally, where he's been, right? And who am I, the dieter? Not just my physiology and my physicality. Okay, so when we do awareness, now we got to go to education. So when you send me my plan, you can't say, hey, here's your macros, you're going to implement this, here's the process, here's the framework, good luck. That's not going to work out real well. Although that's what we do to most of our clients. Hey, here's your plan. Do you have any questions? Well, Mrs. Jones, here's your plan. I know it's 300 calories more than you're used to, but we're reverse dieting. Let me remind you, on this call, we're all coaches. We know what reverse dieting is. We know what metabolic adaptation is. Your clients think reverse is something you put your car in, not a style of dieting. Your clients have no idea what a metabolic adaptation is. let alone the fact that maybe it's the reason they can't lose weight. And yet we're talking to them in what we call trainer brain, not client brain. And so if we want to get into granular education and we want to further the connection, we have to start explaining things on the level of our clients. How will they understand this? More importantly, how can we make sure that they understand this? One of you guys asked about retention after just 3 months. If you have not explained that there are multiple phases, if you have not explained that there are things that come and that everything dietarily stacks on each other, you are to blame, not the client. If your client doesn't understand why their old coach told them that they could have a cheat meal, you're telling them they got to fit it in their macros, you are to blame as the coach. And if you're just showing up as a dictator and you're giving a set of rules and you're not explaining why, your clients will not be with you. Because at the end of the day, education drives compliance, but awareness and education create the best prescriptions. Now, the third thing is desires. This is the most overlooked part of almost every nutritional prescription. Guys, what do your clients want? I'm not talking about their food choices. I'm not talking about their goals, but I'm talking about a collection of the whole. What do they want their life to look like? Mrs. Jones, do you want to have drinks with the girls on Friday night? Is that a non-negotiable, or are you willing to give that up? And I'll tell you guys a great story. I really came across the fact that how important desires were. I thought, you guys all know, I'm a great communicator, right? I understand persuasion at a high level. I always thought I could manipulate a client to do whatever I said. And I had this girl, and she would show up, and every single Tuesday we'd have our call, and it was basically story time. She would tell me how every Friday and Saturday night she would go out, she would get blackout drunk, and she would like eat everything in sight. And like the stories were amazing, right? It was hilarious for like 20 minutes, but then for 10 minutes I was really frustrated as the coach because results weren't happening. And I care more about results than story time. That's what you're paying me for. And so I tried for 6 months to make her feel guilty, to try all the persuasive things I did. Nothing worked. And so I had to come to the conclusion that Friday and Saturday nights getting blackout drunk, eating everything in sight was inside of her desires, and they were never going to change. Whether those desires were right and wrong, they were facts. It's not my job to be the moral judge of her life. I'm her nutrition coach, not her morality coach. And so when we understood those were core desires, I actually built a plan where those calories were factored in, and guess what? She lost 20 pounds in 3 months. All because I understood these were core desires. And watch this, when you actually generate real life awareness, when you actually provide education, when you understand core desires, then and only then can you build application. The problem is every single coach is going the wrong way. You're asking yourself as a coach, when I get a client, when I get an intake form, I'm going to build application. Then I'm going to understand desires, and we're going to talk about desires. Maybe I'll educate, and then I'll get awareness every single week. And so you're working up the ladder instead of down. The reality is, if you want to build the best prescriptions in the world, these 4 things are great. But building the best prescriptions doesn't build the best results, because consistently providing the best prescriptions does. And so this framework also works inside of your check-ins. If you can show up to your check-ins every day and you say, Mrs. Jones, great, let's have a call to awareness. What's going on? What happened the last 7 days? I see you lost 2 pounds, but tell me more. Well, I hit my macros every day, but I was out with my kids, and for the first time in my life, I actually felt sustainable. Boom. Like win. Like y'all need to you need to write that down. You need to celebrate that. You need to acknowledge that with her. You need to get her excited and remind her about the success she is creating. Perhaps the scale went up, but she did everything right. And so here you are, you're looking at macros, you're expecting, hey, maybe she eats some high sugar foods, maybe she eats some intolerant foods, and yet you talk to her, you do real life awareness, and you find out, oh my God, she had a deadline every day for 7 days at work. Without an awareness, you can't create education, and you really can't create proper application. And so every week when you're getting on the call, every week when you're doing your check-in via Loom or via Zoom, whatever it is, you need to be creating awareness, number 1. And we always need to be educating, because if you're not educating, you're not creating success. If your clients don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, they're never going to be massively successful. They're never going to stick to the plan. If they don't stick to the plan, how can we expect them to create success? How can we as coaches be empowered to create the right changes? And the simple truth is we can't. And so we're always educating. Mrs. Jones, this is why the scale went up even though you hit your macros. Stress triggers this thing called cortisol, right? Your body was under an abundance of stress. It felt fight or flight. When stress is too high and cortisol is too high, it affects the HPA axis. Inside of the HPA axis, right, aldosterone is affected. Upregulation of aldosterone means that you're holding onto a little bit of water, and that's just temporary, and that's okay, but it does show up on the scale. Don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry, you didn't gain any body fat. In fact, congratulations on being amazing. But if she doesn't understand that, she's thinking she did things wrong. Now she's going to go up the next week when she could be doing everything perfect. She's going to try to manipulate it. Maybe she's going to do more cardio. Maybe she's going to cut some foods. Maybe she's going to do things that she's used to that brought her to this point. And if you allow her to do those things, you're to blame as the coach. That's not acceptable. Then we got to go into desires. Mrs. Jones, what's coming up this week? Oh, it's your daughter's birthday on Thursday. Do we need to account for that? Are you going to be eating cake? Because I really hope you are. Are you going to eat one slice or are you going to eat the whole cake? Don't worry, I'm not judging if you say the whole cake. Mrs. Jones, are you going to have one drink or are you going to have the whole bottle? Because I know how kids' birthdays can be. You might need the whole bottle. But what is it that you're going to be doing? Because I need to understand, we need to account for this, because if we don't understand the desires of what's coming and we don't plan for it, we become reactive to it on the back end. We're just doing the same disservice to you that you've been doing your whole life. So we need to understand the desires of what's to come the next 7 days, and then look again. Here we go. We have awareness of what brought us. We have education of what's happening. We understand the desires of what's to come, and then and only then and only then and only then can we create proper application. And at the end of the day, you guys are here. You guys understand NCI is the kings of application. 4 years ago, we were the ones that said, fuck your education. We were the ones that said your education is insufficient. It is incomplete, and application truly is the game. And I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much you know about food and physiology. Without these 4 steps, you're never going to create massive success. Because Mrs. Jones doesn't care how smart you are. Mrs. Jones' results care about her implementation. And Mrs. Jones's results, her implementation, come from being able to connect to you. And that connection only comes from application. Application truly is the game.